just to kind of get started, then we'll reintroduce everything. So I guess I'll start it off, LA, and we'll just kind of jump in. So this
Sounds
is
good.
the relaunch of Startup Grind Portland. Beyond that, this is also the official launch of the First City Foundry, which is a collective that LA and you and I have started to sort of bring a group of like-minded operational AI bootstrap type startup folks into the ecosystem here in Portland, and hopefully help Startup Grind get a little bit of traction that way as well, because Portland as ecosystem, I guess, or as a startup ecosystem anyway, tends to be very inwardly focused. When someone comes from the outside and jumps in, people are skeptical, naturally so, I think, and that's kind of a one of the things I both like about Portland, but also can be frustrating for outsiders. And so I'm do a quick introduction. I'm Greg, and I'm the founder of Buildly, as well as Open Build, which is a nonprofit that is built around helping software developers and startups find each other, work together, and train to use AI tools, native tools to be able to build out products and applications. And lived in Portland my whole life, but I went outside of Portland to build my first startup, or most recent startups, and then came back after the pandemic. And now I'm focused on helping to build the ecosystem here as well through First City Foundry, Open Build, and Buildly, all kind of together with that. And then came into Startup Grind, wanted to relaunch that, and then LA, you came on the scene not long after that. So you want to give a quick introduction to what you do and where you're coming
Yeah,
from?
absolutely. Thanks for that intro. I'm excited about what we're doing here, First City Foundry, Startup, and combining AI operations together as a lens. And really, for me,
You're cutting out just a little bit.
cutting
Maybe
out a bit.
yeah, it's there, it's better. I think it
Is
might
it
just
better
be the
now?
microphone placement. Yeah, maybe make
Okay.
sure that the speakers are going through there. Go ahead.
So I'll make sure we're good now. Okay. So I started up in my career actually in the startup ecosystem, working for startups, and I've been through acquisitions. So I've seen, understand what it looks like, what it takes, the grind, the vision, and the ideas. But because of that, I've also been able to go through acquisition and seeing what it is like on the enterprise side at scale. And when I was able to do that, I've been able to tie some of the connective dots between those two worlds. And I've started Current as a way to operationalize and help businesses measure their operational maturity based off of a framework that is looking at how do you go from your idea to build a company to scale, and then also make sure that not only are you growing, but you're growing in the right way. And that's looking at, do you have the right visibility? You have the right margin economics in your business, and is the business built on independence factors? So I'm excited about Startup Grind, excited about what we're building, and how AI is playing a part on that, but also how we can be operationally fine, focused and minded as we're building these tools in these businesses.
Yeah, and I think the AI side of things is kind of interesting as well as we talk operations. And for me, being a software developer, over 20 years, it's just a really quickly changing landscape, faster than anything I've seen before. And I'm curious to see, as we continue all these conversations, how people are adapting to that. But one of the things I think that maybe is still kind of in the early days for you, LA, and as you focus on operations, and then I want to get a better understanding of what operations means to you in that context. But for an AI startup and AI tools, I know that that's a exploration side of things that you're getting into, but specifically looking at software startups, AI startups, and bootstrap startups, especially. Where does operations fit into that? Like, where do you see the let's say the educational aspect for a founder to get started with understanding what operations need to be there initially, and how do they evolve that, and how does that help them to grow down the road?
No, that's a good question. And I would say be thinking about your operational structure of your business um, as soon as you can. I would say shift. Most startups don't fail because the idea was wrong or the market wasn't there. A lot of times they end up failing because the business was never quite built to absorb what was working. So, for instance, you got to set up the environment for the AI tool to scale to succeed. So, every tool that you add, every hire that you make, every new client you close, all that gets absorbed by the operating system. So, that operating system essentially itself was never designed to scale without, you know, clear decision-making processes, understanding what the ROI was. Sometimes you can unintentionally scale bad decision-making hierarchies across the organization faster than you might have intended to. So ultimately, that's not really an AI problem, I would say, and not even sometimes a people problem. I think it starts at it's an architectural problem, and that's why I built Current really focusing on operational architecture to see how is your business structurally designed to handle any oncoming scalability or growth that you're anticipating.
Yeah, the the index survey that you put together, and I think the current sort of drives that whole idea is really interesting to me, and I want to dive a little bit into that as we kind of look through how startups should be set up initially. One of the things that we've had a conversation about is at what stage does the early startup need to start thinking about operations? And I think from your perspective, it's like day one, right? Like you should be thinking operationally as you're building the tool, right, or the product. It seems like, yeah. How does the index help you discover that?
So I would say the index helps you discover that from a standpoint of where are you building and where are you trying to go, right? It kind of forces you, it constrains you to understand what are the market constraints. So ultimately, as you're building a business, you're building a tool using leveraging AI to scale, and we're seeing go to market creation, ideation happen in such condensed modes, and it happens so quickly that we're seeing the innovation and the scale happen much faster than the architecture and operational of the business. So how do we do that? I say we need to shift the thinking as far left to the creation and the build as possible so that it's not more expensive and it's not more costly later. Because oftentimes what happens is not all growth is good growth. And if you're not growing
Yeah.
in an intentional way that is supported by the architecture of your business, that's oftentimes where that burn rate starts to accelerate a little quicker than you thought. Profit leaks start to fall through. And that's why VMI is kind of sequential. Be thinking as soon as you can, do I have the visibility that I need in order to grow this business successfully? And then once you feel like you have the visibility capabilities, then you start to see what are the margin economics, what are the profit leaks, how do I price this, how do I go to market from a pricing and economic standpoint? And then finally from there, you can start to say, okay, how do I start to think about how would this grow? How would I hire? How would decisions get made? Right. And then think about the decision making hierarchy. So
Yeah.
a lot of times, you can be thinking about, all right, let's build something, but how is that growth going to happen? How do you build the architecture that is going to enable it?
Yeah. No, I mean, VMI. First, we need to break down that acronym a little bit and sort of say what does that all mean. But I know from my perspective, whenever I've started, more startups that have failed than succeeded for sure. And I couldn't go back and tell you exactly where most of them failed, but I know for me, it's always come down to I'm trying to solve a problem that I run into. Usually, those are the startups that I end up building, and I want to see if other people have it, and that it comes down to product market fit. And I do that much later. I like to
Mhm.
build something And I know that that's a mistake for a lot of people. Like that you go out and you build something without knowing if there's a product market fit, but you need it, right? And figuring out who is that, the ideal customer profile for this, and it's you most of the time, and then it grows into somebody else. But how does the VMI help with that? And then what is exactly the VMI in terms of figuring out what should you focus on first, right? As you're starting to build out, maybe the product's there, and maybe like we'll talk about later about how hackathons and how those bring up software developers building products at some point, early in the stage, maybe before something that we really know needs to exist, but there is a operational need for it in some contingency somewhere. So how do we adjust for that, and what are those things that this helps with, specifically the VMI? Because if you can explain that.
Yeah, so absolutely. And I would say there's two parts to that. I would say one is strategic, and one is real more so like operational. Like, so first off, like you said, if you're building something, you're solving a problem maybe for yourself, and you say, is there a market for this? And you go find that market. I would say one of the first things you should do is develop a strategic go-to-market strategy to figure out who your ICP is, who your persona, how big that market is. You should know those numbers, right? From a standpoint of, financial returns and your investment. If you're bootstrapping versus VC, you should probably be thinking about all those things. Where VMI comes into play is once you have product market fit, once you have traction, once you have some forward momentum with the product, then you can start to see, okay, now that I have a viable business solution, how do I grow the infrastructure architecturally, structurally to support that growth, right? So the simplex around that is the constraint of saying, what are the lenses that capture most business failure modes? And Current is going to say first is you're going to look at visibility. Oftentimes, businesses that grow scale outgrow their ability to see information and the correct data at the right times. So what I would say then is the first thing you need to do is at any particular point in time, look at your growth and your stage and say, what information, what data do I need to be able to see in a real-time predictive manner to be able to make predictive informed decisions instead of lagging indicator decisions. So just by doing that, you're going to exponentially increase your likelihood of scaling, surviving, and being able to navigate unforeseen issues because you have the proper visibility. So that's why V is important. That's why you got to start with visibility. Then
Yeah.
once you have that, right, then you can start to say, okay, how do I cover the M? And M stands for margin, and margin is the margin economics. So going through your product life cycle from development to customer, looking at the price structure, looking at profit leaks, understanding your tech stack and saying, how's that evolving? What's your business model? Is it subscription? What are their costs going in and out? So once the business is viable, so you have visibility, you have margin, so now the business can float, and you can have confidence in it. And then the third piece is once you have VMI in place, then you can focus on independence. Independence is how does the business actually grow from a people, processes, and the decision-making standpoint, right? Can the business be independent of the initial person who built it? So it's essentially getting from the person who built the app, built the tool, built the company, are they building a business around it? So that's the three acronyms of VMI: visibility, margin, and then independence.
Okay. And for some reason, I always start on the I think, which is independence. And that, to me, it's like that's the whole point of a startup for me from the beginning has been a way to get away from the let's say, less than creative endeavors that you are able to do inside of a large corporation, or even I work for government organizations, I've worked for large corporations, but I usually enjoy startups the most because of that independence and freedom. But what would you say is like the biggest operational bottleneck that you see in these sort of as you're going through this with other startups or
So I
organizations in
would,
general?
so yeah, so usually it's a maturity of the life cycle where it's earlier on, it tends to be visibility because they try to skip to I, like you essentially said, that's a common trap. right? So visibility is oftentimes the issue that the earlier companies have. And sometimes the ones that are getting to the million, 3 million, 5 million stage, that's actually where independence starts being one of the biggest bottlenecks because that company has some of the visibility, have margin, but the founder themselves become the bottleneck. Decisions can't really be made, and the company kind of stagnates a bit. So I would say earlier on, it tends to actually be visibility, right? Making predictive decisions, making sure you have the right information and data. But later on in maturity curve, it actually tends to be independence a little bit more common.
Yeah, I mean, I see that, and I guess you could sort of reorder this and depending on the type of startup you're building, right? Bootstrap versus because you're right in the sense that to me, I feel like independence is lost once you go down that road to get funding, right? So once you've got some money in the bank that isn't from a customer, even a customer can sort of start to take away some of that independence, but obviously in a good way. You want to get there. So that makes a lot of sense. But yeah, for me, I've always gone a little bit the opposite direction. But visibility has been an issue for me, and that's usually at the smaller size because I will bring in a marketing or salesperson later after I've already sort of figured out what my product is that I want to build and what that direction should be. So where does that like if you've got a 2 to 3 person startup and you want to start scaling now, right? And is what's
Hmm.
that next? It should the founder be a salesperson necessarily, or should they have that? Like where do those processes scale? And there's a good question around this that came from the chat from Joanna, who thank you, Joanna, for joining us. Um, that she's also got a question around operational architecture and whether or not it can be more like workflows or can it be automated at some level as well, from my perspective. But can you say that operational architecture is like a workflow or a set of workflows?
So yes, potentially, and Current has aspirations to get there and productize it, right? Because if you think
Mm,
about what it is it's measuring operation maturity and essentially saying what structural pillar is weakest and where should you focus on. So let's say there is a diagnostic that happens, then there is a let's say we reveal structurally, like let's say visibility is the issue. Well, to actually say it's could it be a workflow, well then yes, I would say and this is pulling exactly from my site. Let's say if it was a visibility workflow would be we need to replace trailing P&L management with a pulse report and leading indicators. Then you need to architect a capacity only warning system to surface bottlenecks before they materialize. Then the next
mm,
step is you design the evidence-based decision framework so you can operate from data, not instincts. Then the third
yeah,
piece is map the information flow from source to decision maker across all the business functions. So there are workflows that you would go through, and those are essentially pillar sprints based
mm,
on which structure the pillar you're focusing on. Are you focusing on visibility? Are you focusing on margin? Are you focusing on independence? And Current actually has very prescriptive stages that you should work through for those.
yeah.
Um,
That's
so
good.
yeah, so that's that question. But Greg, to your other question, I think I might have heard is the founder salesperson and how does that all
Where yeah.
work?
When did this? Yeah. When do you start to look at scale? Because I when I think of scaling, I think naturally of initially of like operations on the developer side, especially AI. That's something that gets left behind is how to test, how to scale your actual architecture, your software architecture. But
Mm,
now once you have that worked out, now you look at scaling processes that are across each business side, and that means marketing
hmm
and sales, and that means probably HR. And so, like, what point is a good time for you to look at as a founder or set of founders to start looking at the not necessarily from the visibility side, I guess, but just the
hmm
entire process. Like, when do you start to look at what should be that first hire for you as a group or as an individual founder?
That's a very great question. And I will say too, it would depend, but with some caveats. If you're bootstrap versus you have some VC backed funding, I think it's gonna probably
Yeah.
determine that the velocity of that hiring cadence. I would maybe say that Bootstrap may be a little bit more conservative in that speed and pace and bringing on additional people to the team. But either way, I would say that you definitely want to have your visibility pillar locked in, right? Because you want to be able to see the information that you need. And then from there, you need to understand, like you said, the product itself is scaling and growing. So are you getting new subscriptions? Are you getting new users? Then you need to see, then start working on that M pillar to say, okay, today, what is your burn rate? How long does that last? And then when do you break even from a profitability standpoint? All right. Because if you're bootstrap, that is key because you likely want to be having crossed that profitability standpoint and having your margin economics be somewhat within a bandwidth of what that benchmark should be. So if you're a SaaS tool and you're seeing early traction and you're getting, 35% return, right, and profit, right, margins look good, you have visibility, and you see continued adoption and user base, then I would say, okay, let's start thinking about hiring maybe a salesperson that's going to accelerate uh, that expansion. Because once you do that, though, you need to be very quickly, I would say, after sales, be thinking about the person who's going to come in and scale your operations. Because one of the worst things that you could do is uh, bring demand that you can't fulfill, right? Or go to market and have things that are happening so quickly that the company itself isn't even ready to absorb. So you're starting to lose opportunities. You're starting to lose money that goes through the cracks. So I would say visibility, make sure your margin economics are good, you've broken even, and then you understand that next sales person's impact, and then bring on the operations person that can help the business scale with that growth.
Yeah. And I guess the real question is if you're looking at AI workflows or automated workflows, like, and I hate to bring this up, but at what point does a marketing team or a sales team or a different operational aspects of a business look at automating away some of those positions? Should they? Or is it still too early to be able to say that? I feel like a lot of startups have started to look at
Hmm.
that. A lot of bigger corporations have looked at it for a while and said, this isn't working. AI is replacing certain things, but it's creating more problems in some cases than others. Where does AI fail for you anyway in that process? And I guess from my perspective, I look at things from a product perspective and building that software product. And I think AI helps a lot, but it's more, to me, it's better as an augmentation tool for the user or the software developer in this case, or the product manager, where maybe we don't need as much of their time because it's automating some of those processes away. But where, and from an operational standpoint, where does that fail for you?
Well, I would say, and that's within the whole episode on that, but on a clear level, I would say is this at the decision making level,
Yeah.
whoever has decision making funding power has to believe in it. Because first thing is, there has to be an environment where it is welcomed and is going to be able to be built around. So there's resistance at that level. Usually, I've seen it doesn't really work out too well when there's resistance. But if there, let's say there's buy-in at the executive level, and then I would say then there needs to be data. You need to make sure that the data itself is organized and structured in a way that the AI could use, because what you put into it, it literally amplifies, right? So bad stuff in, bad data out. So I would say that you need to essentially understand, what are you trying to accomplish by bringing the AI on? Are you trying to accelerate, trying to be more efficient, right? So understand what is the actual
Or
use
just
of
save
the AI,
money,
right?
right?
Right, or to save money. But you can end
Yeah,
up doing that in the short term, right? Short term save money, long term maybe not,
that's
right?
true.
So I think we're starting to see that some of these bigger enterprises are hedging their bet because they're so big and they have to move very quickly, very early, right?
Yeah.
And because of that, they're kind of exposed, and some of the smaller, earlier stage companies are probably following suit and saying, okay, we got to be aggressive and save money. But ultimately, I feel that if you think that is something that you can do to minimize redundancy and make things more efficient, then you should absolutely do so. But you should also empower the people that are there to be able to manage those AI workflows, right? So that you
Yeah.
can have an additional, what I would say, infrastructure layer there, that connects the siloed potential that can happen. Because all of a sudden you have departments that are saying we're AI enabled, but all of a sudden the actual communication between the teams and departments starts to actually fray. And that's kind of one of the big unforeseen hurdles I think we're going to start seeing is how do the actual teams actually talk and communicate when the
Yeah.
assumption is that the AI is handling all of the workflows. Are they
Yeah. Or
handling the
can
decisions too? So
yeah.
that's where,
Well, or can you even tell? Like half the time, I think with AI, uh, like having conversations with support bots or having sometimes you can tell right away. Other times it's getting like we had the conversation about one. There was some I can't remember which fast food restaurant that was using AI to talk to the customers outside of the restaurant. You know, as they're going through the drive-through, and then you get up to the window and it says, "Oh, by the way, you were just talking to an AI, and it sometimes gets things wrong. So please repeat your order." Right? The the communication can be really
yeah,
disrupted in that sense, right? And I think
I think,
from a
mhm,
yeah, from a product planning standpoint, like I like I said, I usually build things that fill a niche that I see, and it's something that I want. A lot of times, though, you're not going to get funded with those ideas unless you've established a user base, or at least you have customers that you want to bring into that, and getting their feedback into that process as well. I know from our standpoint, I built out Buildly Labs, which is our product management tool, to help facilitate the communication just internally, right, between a product team and the team that's building it, and trying to bring that together as one team instead of two separate teams and facilitating that conversation. But then you bring AI into it, and we built an AI assistant into it where it helps the product manager automate a lot of things, but it also does some communication, right? So it does, some developers get sometimes comments from the AI that comes through as the assistant, the product assistant. Like where do you see that sort of split? Do we need to like even look at an operational standpoint of being clear about who's communicating? Is this the AI or is it the person? And how should we prioritize that? Or should there be a difference? Should it matter? Because there does need to be a human in the loop, I think, at all of these stages. And I think it's an interesting question of if you're developing from a let's say an initial product that is just to fit your need, and then you want to see if there's a product market fit, versus something like Joanna was talking about, the hackathon winners that she sees using operational architecture or workflow for their product, and they only build it once they have that in place, right? So that means all of those pieces are already there for some of these folks that are doing, and that's certainly a great way to approach it. But at what point, like, to me, I think the feedback loops from the customer, getting that, like that, I'd rather build an idea and then drop it into the universe, as it were, and see how people react to it, and then bring that feedback in. But automating it versus real, like how do we get that in there?
no, I agree. So I would say looking at it from my frame is I think there is a bit of more, slightly more risk as you move in the maturity of VMI. I would say I will start and say leveraging AI to be able to get you to parse data, to pull insights, to give you visibility. It could be your eyes. It could read through data. It could pull out blind spots for you. So it can really be a leverage for you there. Then all of a sudden you say, how do you scale that down? Okay, we've got the visibility workflows, got AI enabled here. And then from there, say, can AI then help us make better margin and economic decisions around pricing structure and profit leaks and where could we do things differently? Okay. And then I will say the riskiest of it is then when you start to use AI for the independence layer, when then it starts to be okay, influencing how decisions are made, when and where information goes, who gets what information, right? You might have a product assistant, like you just said, that is essentially an AI at the independence layer, right? So that's what I
Yeah,
would say is the last most sophisticated layer of which you would have an AI. But by that time, the business has already learned how to use it for visibility. They understand it from a margin economics. And then by the time the company's using AI to support actual decisions and workflows to remove people, um, it's actually kind of gone through a maturity process along with the
yeah,
company's growth and scale. And I would say that is probably a way I would say you could think about scaling AI itself as the business grows and start it with the
yeah.
visibility and the margins and the independence. And then, like you said, sometimes it's very tempting just to start right at the independence and say, I want to build something that's going to make the decisions. Right.
Yes, I can see like where the longer we have these conversations, the more these like my approach has always been open source and software developer and build a product that fits the need that you have, and you come at it from this other operational side, and it's going to be really interesting to see how these things, especially as we get to talk to more people, because
Hmm.
I like AI for agentic workflows and but I also use it sometimes, like if I'm a software developer, I'll use it just to do autocomplete and nothing else, because I don't want it to get outside of my control, right? I want to be a human
Hmm.
in the middle of that, but I also sometimes I just want to be have it help me and be the control and not have it, uh, hold that over me, I guess. But then getting customer feedback loops in there is a
Hmm.
process thing that I've been working on for a while, but I think it makes sense from a operational standpoint to find ways to and facilitate that communication, use AI to clean it up, to use it as more of like a research assistant in some cases, all right, and help with certain aspects of the business, but not can have as much control.
You think
So yeah,
every company should have a Clippy?
yeah, Clippy. No, as long as it's not Clippy, anything but Clippy.
Anything but
But yeah,
Clippy.
I like the chatbot approach. But you're right. The one of the things that I've been working on, I will just sort of put out there is this idea of personality in AI, especially when you talk
Hmm.
with chatbots, or but more importantly, I think as you work with these as assistants, there's a whole group in the Bay Area that's working on the idea of consciousness and what that looks like in a pseudo conscious way inside of an AI. And groups like Anthropic are already addressing this a little bit, but I just like the things that hallucinations that we see sometimes can come across as too real, right? It comes across as something coming from the AI maybe, and we understand it differently than other people. So I think it's an interesting topic that we'll jump into more. Um, but I think it's going to be an interesting an interesting time to have these conversations. So as we get in, let's go back to the Portland and the community angle a little bit as we start
Hmm.
to wrap this up a little bit. Um, I think it's interesting that what we're looking at in terms of like a typical bootstrap culture versus VC heavy ecosystem. Portland is sort of shifting a little bit towards VC a little bit more. There's more VC starting to come in, but they died away for a long time and they hadn't been there. And I think the bootstrap culture got lost in there. But I think there's an opportunity while this is sort of going for AI first local startups, right? And what does AI first mean? I guess to you or to me is different, but I think there's some continuity happening between that transition between, unfortunately, a lot of these uh, companies that are laying off software developers and IT, and what they're looking at next. And a lot of it is building a product, building, maybe I can't find a job. If I looked on LinkedIn, I saw a thing the other day where there's 100 plus applicants for every real job that you see already, almost as soon as it's posted. And so it's hard for a software developer or anyone in IT or really anyone to find a job right now. And they start to look at that. I think what we want to do and I want to do is find ways to help those folks if they want to look at transitioning to being a startup, or just building a product first, right? And then having it be AI enabled is certainly important to that. What when you as we talk about what's happening in Portland coming up over the next, as we transition into summer, you talk about VCs, right? And they a lot of
Yeah.
times they kind of hibernate for the summer. I don't know why, but they kind of go away, and you end up work. I That's when I end up working on the product the most. But let's talk a little bit about, as we transition into summer, what are the things that we're looking forward to, and in the community and things like that. We have an event coming up that we'll talk about in a little bit,
Hmm.
as we talk about AI and we talk about some of these great things. But what are the things that you're looking forward to, both in the short term? I know Startup Week is coming.
Yeah, I was gonna
Um,
say that.
yeah. So what are you? I haven't had a chance to look at that. What are you starting to look at for that?
So I would say Startup Week is definitely a big one. Shout out to that. It starts May 11th. I believe there's a kickoff in Big Pink. I believe it's hosted, sponsored by Merrill Lynch. I believe it's like 5 p.m. on that day on the 11th. I'm planning on being there for a few days and events all across the city. Each year it seems like it gets bigger and bigger, and it's great to see the momentum and how people are able to put on events and see the support that is happening for them. Also, too, over the next couple months, just current working with some founder-led cohorts and founder groups over the next few months too. So lots of stuff is happening in between the worlds of operations, AI, and the startup ecosystem. And like you said too, lots of stuff happening with OEN. Um, a lot of GPC,
Yeah.
consumer packaged goods stuff is happening too, with
Where are
regards
you?
to
Yeah, where are you finding these events and things to go to? Are you using the PDX calendar, or and what groups are you going out to and checking out?
So though there is I think the actual PDX Startup Week
Yeah,
calendar. There's also the Silicon Forest calendar. Rick Tarosi
yeah,
does a
Rick. Yeah.
pretty good job in the ecosystem, keeping a pretty nice calendar of events that are going on. So I think yeah,
Oh,
Llama,
Luma, the
Luma,
Luma.com, the PDX tech calendar, Joanna just mentioned, is another good
there you
place
go.
to take a look at. And I know that the Pi community is something that we always tap into, and they've got their Slack groups, and they've got their main site. And at one point, Rick had gone away from software and focused more on brick and mortar type startups. And I don't know if that's changed for them, but that was kind of a gap that we wanted to fill a little bit as well, is to focus on software startups here. But I think also, just in general, like AI and tech is is evolving so quickly that I'm not sure that you can call anything an AI startup or a software startup. It's all just sort of becoming startups. And then you get into that question of what's a small business versus what's a startup. And
Exactly.
I
Like
don't want.
what's the AI tech startup, right? Essentially, I'm starting to see when I talk to founders, especially smaller 1 to 10 person teams, where maybe they didn't start off using AI, but they're very much in the know and they're building out, workflows and pulling it into the fold where they're AI enabled, right? So in some ways, like, are they a tech company? Uh,
Yeah.
I think are they a tech startup? In some ways, if
Oh,
you look at yourselves, in some ways, yes, I think that line is kind of starting to get blurred more.
it's blurry. Yeah. I mean, I've been working with software developers to start to train them to be more product managers as well, because I see their role evolving into becoming more than just, which I feel like we've sort of become AI babysitters and QA testers for the AI in some cases. And I want to see that change a little bit, but I think you need to learn all aspects, and you can't really manage a software AI that's building software for you without knowing how to build software initially, right? I think that's still relevant and will continue to be relevant. But you can automate a lot of workflows around that as well. Joanna mentioned, she's working on a holistic wellness platform. which sounds really interesting, and she's going to be building it to be automated, so she doesn't have to be there. Like this is, I'm assuming it's a single founder system where you're just building a product and releasing it as a startup, and it's an AI
Hmm.
startup. She has some software background for sure, but I don't think that's something you could do before, right? So I think it's really interesting. I'm excited
That,
to see where this all
yeah,
right.
that is interesting too. And yeah, I would say that uh, I think we just had, I think, our first cohort here in the AI Oregon Accelerator, right, where every single one of us, I think, believe all those companies essentially said we're starting with AI as an AI native empowered company. And I think it was some 20, 30 of them right here that are just starting to brew and build those
Yeah.
types of tools. So I agree. And just Joanna had the comment that VCs are seemingly only investing in companies with a AI stack nowadays, right? So if you're essentially a startup, can you even build a startup without using AI and get funding?
Well, and does it matter then if you put AI in your name at all anyway? Because is that
People are
going
going to
to
assume
attract?
it. People are going to assume
Yeah,
maybe, or
they're
I
going
don't
to
know. At a
assume
certain
it. Yeah,
point, maybe at a certain point, I think people are going to assume that your business is in some way leveraging or using it.
yeah. Well, and Joanna made the other comment that there's a investors in Portland who are looking for AI engineers because their startups are stuck because they built it in a half of the business that I get now is people that are coming from uh, you know, platforms where they built it in what we call it vibe coding platforms, right? And then the vibe coding platform basically hallucinates something or forgets what they were working on. You move on, you deploy it. Hopefully, you've got a good infrastructure behind it. Probably not in most cases, or you're deploying it into their environment where they own much of the hosting and you're paying a lot for their support. But they're not helping to fix bugs. They come to us through Buildly and say, "Hey, I need a startup engineer. I need an AI engineer. I need a startup co-founder, a technical co-founder now because I don't know how to make the scale. I don't know how to deploy this in a microservice architecture. I don't know how to use Kubernetes. I don't know like where do I take all these things? And same thing probably from the operational standpoint, right? You build out a marketing pipeline or something through AI, and then something goes wrong. Well, how do you fix it, right?
You got to
And
plan until something goes wrong.
yeah, and you don't know like
Hmm.
for me, if I'm building a sales and marketing platform, I know basics about it, but I don't know where it's going wrong. I don't know what it's misleading. I don't know if it's hallucinating sometimes in the advice it's giving me. And so I think having people in the loop is just as important.
You
Um,
know that's me thinking of, Greg, is it's hard to tell, and maybe as we get more from the index, we'll be able to see it's like what percentage of companies are really starting to build off of that, right, using the vibe coding method, and how often do you get the unintentional consequence of trying to deploy something that was then vibe coded, but then realizing that once you get to a critical infrastructure of like more than 1,000 people, uh, what happens when it breaks, and has that already started happening? And then what are those stories? And then
yeah,
how do you fit? And then how do you even fix that? Because I feel that for a while, vibe coding was everybody was talking about it, and I
yeah,
wonder how many companies, quote unquote, have been started via vibe code and maybe have some traction, but haven't even got to that issue yet, but maybe will, and don't and
yeah.
aren't even not aware and are not aware of it yet.
Well, it used to be you built for scale first. Like that was the whole idea of cloud native is building out initially in something that could be scaled easily and build it right the first time. You don't have to worry about the refactors and the rebuilds that happen down the road. But now everything has to look at refactor. Every product that comes out is built by, at least some point by AI, if not majoritively AI. And you have to go back through and rework all that. So I think in a tight knit community like Portland, there's only so many options, right, to go to get some help around these things. And hopefully that's one thing that we can provide as an ecosystem of set of partners and continue to grow is one, a way to help each other out, get more connected through the community, and then find folks that are working on similar things and really work on. That's the way Portland has always kind of done things. You can look through, even the early history, early 2000s, right? When I first started doing this, there was a whole bunch of folks that were just trying to figure things out. Like I remember mp3.com, WebMD. There were all these, smallish startups that were growing here in Portland in the Bay Area and coming up, and then just connecting, right? Having they didn't have the meetups like they do now, but that's when like Caligator and all of those things kind of started back then, to bring those folks together to solve these problems. Now you can use AI to solve some of it, but I feel like in a lot of cases it's building big problems as well. And so you need to have that community around to help with those.
Yeah,
So,
absolutely. That's what I'm excited about this, so we can surface some of those, bring them to light, discuss them, and get people thinking a little bit more proactively. Lots is happening. It's happening so quick and so fast. So I don't think we'll be, out of lack of things to discuss and talk about at the intersection of startup, AI, and operations.
oh yeah, I think all of this is really interesting, and I think it's a necessary, not just for this community, but I think as we grow, and that one of the things that we want to do with these foundries is grow into other cities eventually as well and expand that network, right? So that there's no reason why a Portland co-founder couldn't go and talk to a Seattle co-founder. Maybe they don't want to go see a Timbers or Sounders game together, but they can work on a project like this together. And I think
Hmm.
we, much as I don't like going down to the valley very often, there's a lot of resources there as well that we want to be able to tap into, and down in LA, and so bring some of that stuff together, and hopefully provide some options for folks to get solve these problems, not in a vacuum. Because if we are building startups on our own, that's great. I think building products on your own, releasing those, like that's what the Collab Hub at Buildly is for, right? We've got a marketplace for people to release open source projects, but at the same time, they still want help, right? They got to debug things. The community has to be there in order to help with that, and AI
So
can
you
help
can go
to a certain
fast,
degree.
right? You can go
Yeah,
fast, but if you want to go far, still, the African proverb is, like, I think it's a speed and amplification and acceleration, right? But I
yeah,
don't think it necessarily means that what you're building is going to be scalable, resilient, and sustainable. And I think that is where you got to have the right people, processes, and tools around it to support it. Or you just, be quickly going into, not where you want to go.
yeah. So I guess with that, we'll hint a little bit at what else is coming up for the Foundry. The next event that's coming through Startup Grind is coming very soon, May 21st, I think. Um, and the this will be an in-person event. It's going to happen. I think it's what are we calling it? The Startup in a Day Hackathon Masterclass with Amber AI founders. So this is 4:30 p.m. on May 21st. You can go to startupgrind.com/Portland and find the event, sign up there. It's going to happen at the White Owl Social Club. And LA and I will be there, and we're going to meet with these founders. They're not going to do an actual hackathon there. They're going to tell us about how they got so successful doing this. Because these are, and I'll just hint a little bit at, these are guys that are in high school, and they've built out a really interesting platform. And I don't know how much we can share, and I want them to share most of what they've done. But it's going to be a really interesting time to learn from them and how they're built. Because the reality is hackathons for developers has become not just a way to learn some new technologies and get out there, but that's how they're making money, because they're having a hard time getting funding any other way or getting even jobs, and so they're earning money sometimes just by going to hackathons. And these guys have figured out a way to do that and really make some money and get funded. Um, so this is going to be one you people are not going to want to miss. We're going to want to get as many people signed up as we can. I think there's I think I'm not sure what the capacity there is, but we've got a number of folks of options available there still. So White Owl Social Club,
Yeah.
Southeast Eighth, right in Portland. It's going to be interesting for sure. I'm
Got room for
excited to
400
talk to.
people.
What?
So got room for 400 people. So
400.
uh,
Okay,
yeah. So you can sign up. We'll be there. Looking forward to it. Learning and some insights from that group.
nice. Yeah, it's going to be interesting. I think this will be the first. I don't know if we'll continue to do a lot of in-person events over the summer. We'll see. Maybe there'll be some interest for it. But we're going to continue to do these in both a live stream and podcast form at some point. And we'll share that out and start to promote all of this and start to build this community into something that we can grow organically, but also, maybe we'll be using AI to push some of these things out and market it. And we'll share those tools as well that we're using and how we're using them and or building in some cases. And then get more insights from LA, especially like the stuff around operations. I admit it's something that I look past far too often when I start a new company. So I'm excited to learn more from you and continue to grow this. So
Oh, absolutely. One last thing though too is I do want to say join the index. Please join the index. It is going to be great. You're going to get benchmark details as we collect the data around what's going on in the Portland ecosystem around opt-in and the adoption for the AI tools that people are using, and just to get a sense for what can we learn and glean from that. Also, definitely excited for what's going to be coming.
yeah, and I think the other thing is like these hackathons that are happening and starting to happen more often. Follow those because even if you're not a software developer, they're going to need help building out the business side of things, right? Like LA's can go to these things and help them with their operational side, but they're going to need marketing, business folks, sales folks. Go check these out and see what you can do and participate. Right. The thing with open source and software development in general, and even if it's not open source, is like the more people participate, the more user feedback, the more processes get evolved through that. And I think that's how we get better products out there, and especially in a local small ecosystem that we hope to grow even more in Portland. I think that there's going to be a lot of the need for business side partners in this that need to get involved
Hmm.
and learn some of the software side as well, understand it, right? So you can be a good partner in that.
Yeah, yeah. But
All
we
right.
can get those two sides connected and speaking the same language earlier in the process. I think this is a win-win, right?
Yeah, yeah. Okay, well, great. Well, that I think, unless there's anything else, LA, you want I'm good. I feel like this was
No.
a great introduction. We went a little
Hmm.
over, I think, that we wanted to, but there's so much to
Yeah.
talk about. So
Yeah, this was great. Great introduction for the relaunch. Excited for the event we're going to be doing on the 21st in person and what we're building and looking forward to seeing the community start to grow.
yeah. All right. Well, thanks for those who attended. Thanks again, and hopefully we'll have some more people showing up on the 21st, and we'll really start to see this grow. All right. Thanks, everybody.
All right.
Bye.
Bye.